Hello, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Coin A Geek. My name is Eliot Hillis. I am one of your hosts, and I'm being joined by my good friend and co-host, Daniel Schultz. Say hello, Daniel.
Oh, hola.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm excited to do this show. We have been talking about doing a podcast together for a while.
It's true.
And so if you're a first-time listener, welcome. This is everybody's a first-time listener because this is the first show.
Whoa, dang.
So, so let's talk about what the heck this show is and why we're doing it. Daniel, why don't you tell us why we're doing a show?
Why we're doing a show? Because we're fans who like to talk about video games, and we already do it together without microphones on. So we might as well do it with microphones on and let you all hear the crazy stuff that we say. Because you and I, we're very similar, but we're also very different. And so There's times when we agree 100%. There's times when we disagree 100%, but we always do it reasonably. So I think it'd make for a good show.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to do this. And so what you caught there at the beginning was this is a show primarily about gaming. We're going to discuss video games, everything related to it, whether that's the newest game that's come out, the newest story that's come out. Maybe we'll even talk some retro games. We're going to leave it pretty open, but the term Coin A Geek allows us to kind of expand a little bit out of that. So if we throw in some stuff about superheroes or whatever, we're going to try and feel free to do that. So one of the things Daniel and I talked about when we decided why we wanted to do this show is because we talked about just having kind of like a very discussion-based water cooler type conversation.
Right.
As Daniel mentioned, he and I talk about video games when we're not podcasting. It's something we're both very passionate about. It's something that we want to bring you guys in on and let you hear our opinions and just participate. So it's very open. It's very conversational. And Daniel, what do you think about what we're trying to do here?
Well, I think it'll be fun because there's not really an agenda here. We're not trying to accomplish anything. We're not trying to, become some super popular thing or make money or anything. We're just really trying to talk and let you guys in on the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So what this show is a discussion-based podcast about video games primarily, but what it is not, we are not journalists. We are not experts in the field. We do some research to make sure we kind of have an idea of what we're talking about, but the idea is to kind of, if you were to run into your buddy that likes video games and you were just to start talking about something, you don't go in there with a whole, shelf full of notes and come in there and discuss that with them. You're not necessarily trying to be a journalist in this sense. There's plenty of great podcasts out there. Some of the ones that, Daniel and I are fans of. I'm a big fan of Colin Moriarty, and Daniel's a big fan of Young. Yeah. Great shows out there. So if you're looking for something that is much more journalistic, or you want to kind of be dive into things a little bit more, that's probably not the podcast for you. This is just here to talk about it, and hopefully you guys enjoy what we have to say. And as we start to grow, you guys will maybe chime in a little bit. So
yeah, we'd love interaction. I think just to hear back from people. This is like if you're having a conversation, often people will join in. They'll offer their 2 cents, and we want 2 cents. I'd like 2 cents.
I just keep thinking of that stupid joke, like, this is an A and B conversation, so see your way out of here.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, we don't want to get out of here. We want you guys to participate.
See your way in here.
Daniel, so tell the audience a little bit about who you are. Let's talk a little bit about us being Christians and kind of where that's going to influence what people that are listening to the show who know us as apologians. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, sure. Yeah, we're both Christians. We go to Apologia Church. We're both really heavily involved in it and have been for some time. But if you think about it, your worldview impacts so much of what you think and what you do. It's the framework, the lens in which you see everything else.
Right.
And so as Christians, our worldview is very, very impactful on the way we think about things, the way we see things. And we shouldn't try to get away from that.
Right.
We should try to, embrace that. And when a topic lends itself to something that is relevant to religion or to our worldview in general, we're going to talk about it.
Right.
But it's not going to necessarily be the primary thing. Our goal is not to tell you how Zelda is theological You know, some people want to do that and they want to listen to podcasts like that. That's fine. That's great. There's stuff out there like that. But that's not really our goal. Everything we're going to say is going to be informed by our worldview, but it's not going to be, this podcast isn't necessarily going to be driven towards that kind of commentary.
Right. So what you're saying is this isn't like video game church, essentially.
No.
Yeah. So we're not coming here to try, like, the agenda isn't to come and to say, hey, come here for your theological meat. You know, if you are a Christian and you listen to this show, I hope you understand where it is that we're coming from. I just don't want to give off the wrong impression that we're here necessarily. The agenda isn't necessarily to try and always justify video games or to try and grow you theologically is not our agenda, right? Like it's not necessarily like a ministry in that sense.
No. I think we can assume that if you're listening to this, we don't need to defend our playing of video games to you.
Right.
If you don't like the types of video games we're playing, or you think Christians shouldn't play that, or I mean, that's fine. You can have your opinion, but we're not going to be offering, at least for the most part, I don't think, some sort of apologetic for the video games that we play and things that we do. Obviously, some of those discussions might come up, and we would address them if they're necessary.
Right.
But for the most part, I think we're pretty settled in the opinions that we have, and it's not like we're doing things that we think aren't going to glorify God. So if you disagree, you can disagree, but we're still gonna steamroll right past.
Right, and it's different than the other shows that Apologia does, right? So we are recording at Apologia Studios. We're not putting this out there as like this is another leg of Apologia Ministries. Right. Those guys who are familiar with Apologia are probably familiar with the podcast with Jeff Durbin and the other hosts, and then Sheologians. If this is not necessarily trying to be that.
No, and this is a pirate broadcast. This is unsanctioned. We in no way represent the views of Jeff Durbin or Apologia Studios, even though we're
don't write Jeff and be like, hey, did you know that your two members are saying this about this? You know, feel free to disagree with us. We're cool with that. But there's not really anything. By the way, there's no real such thing as like an unbiased view on anything, right? Like everybody carries their worldview into there, whether you're an atheist or whether you're a liberal or conservative, whether you're a Mormon or a Christian, whatever it is. When you talk about something, you're imparting your worldview into that. So we are going to talk about it. Just understand that if you're not a Christian, you can totally listen to this show. That's the goal. If you are, you can listen to it as well. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on where we're coming from on that before, with the right expectations. So,
yep.
Cool. Well, cool, man. Well, I'm excited, dude. Daniel, I'm curious about your background a little bit. So I obviously know you play video games or else we wouldn't have had this talk about the show. But just real briefly, tell us, like, what did you grow up playing? What do you play now? What is kind of your draw to gaming? What do you like to do?
Well, see, when I was a kid, we didn't have any video game consoles. When I was a young kid, we didn't have any video games on a computer, nothing like that.
Right.
The only thing I had was a Tiger Electronic baseball game, which I played a ton of and were super fun.
Yeah.
And my brother had the football one, if you remember those games. But eventually, my parents got a PC. And so primarily when I grew up playing old DOS games and various games that my parents would find in a bargain bin, or we found in a bargain bin and threw a couple of bucks at, or saved up money. Need for Speed was a big one that I remember purchasing, saving up money and purchasing.
On the computer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, played a lot of that.
Did you do the keyboard or did you have like a controller?
Oh, we did keyboard, and not only that, we played 2-player on the same keyboard. My brother and I would sit there right next to each other playing on the same keyboard. So that's really my growing up was I played video games as far as console games at friends' houses, and so I think that's where my love of retro gaming came from. Is I didn't have it. It wasn't my norm. And so, because I saw other people had it, I wanted to play those things, and they still have that wonder and excitement for me even today. It's not nostalgia because I didn't get to play them as much. It's more like I get to discover these things.
Interesting. So you mentioned that. So you're a bit of a collector, right? When it comes to So talk about that a little bit.
Well, so eventually I became an adult, and I had some money, I had some cash to throw around, right? And I wasn't married, and so I thought, hey, let's get some of these old games. And one Christmas, my mom finally came through and bought me a Super Nintendo. I was like 22 years old, and it was a good Christmas that year. I suddenly had a flashback to when I was 7 and wanting a Super Nintendo, but I got it. And basically after that, I just started collecting old video games, I'd look out for them. I'd go to places I thought where I might find some and try to get them at a good price. And so I've got, I mean, it's not an extensive collection, but I've got a lot of the games that I wanted to play.
Right.
And you know, this is a big thing. Let's say 2012 was like the golden era of collecting retro games because it hadn't quite gotten to the resellers yet.
Okay.
It was still, you could still go into a pawn shop and get an old Nintendo game for 25 cents because people thought, oh, it's old, cheap.
Right.
And now they think, oh, people are interested in this, therefore it's worth money. And so you've got people that want to resell these things at the swap meet, you know, the swap meet or the flea market. And so they show up at a Goodwill right when it opens. They run in, they look for any video games, they buy them, and they resell them at the swap meet. And they get damaged and they get destroyed, and it's just a big tragedy. But
those dang capitalists.
Yeah, dang.
Driving up the market.
But you know, I have collected it. I think my collecting days are over. You know why?
Yeah.
You know why my collecting days are. It's actually out there in the public. Yeah, my wife's pregnant, so.
Yay! So a new little gamer.
Yep.
Another challenger enters.
Yep.
The fray. Well, so what's the most current console that you own?
I have an Xbox One.
You do have an Xbox One?
Yeah, I have an Xbox One.
Okay.
So I have all the, you know, I've got a lot of consoles. I don't have a PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4, but otherwise, I've got the big ones going back pretty far. I mean.
So tell me why did you want to do this podcast? Why did you want to talk about
Why do I want to talk about video games? I just like talking about things, man. I mean, you know me, I can talk about just about anything without much preparation. So I've got that sort of, lack for a better term, BS artist gene where I can just sort of, you know, talk about things. But I like video games, man. It's an outlet that I don't get to do as much as I'd like anymore because I'm just so busy with everything else.
Sure.
But it's one of those things that's just a relief to me to be able to talk about something that is low key. Nothing, you know, worlds aren't going to crumble. No nation is going to be destroyed because I didn't like a certain video game or I love a certain video game.
Oh, yeah. You haven't been online enough. You haven't seen the collapse of society, what happens when you disagree about a game. I've abandoned that era of my life of looking on the internet for my... Yeah.
Oh, man, I could think back, flashbacks to scrolling through forums and chats.
That's a whole other show,
Oh, my
right?
gosh, no.
Well, cool, man. Well, I'm glad you're here, dude, and I value your insight and just you know, you and I have been friends for a while, and we've said before, we like to talk about this kind of stuff. So I think it's important for the audience to kind of know where you're coming from. So for me, right, I grew up actually kind of similar to you. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. Played a lot of those Tiger handheld games.
Right.
By the way, how old are you, Daniel?
I'm 29.
You're 29.
Yep.
So I just turned 36 in July. So I'm a few years older than you, but we have a similar upbringing in terms of what we were allowed.
There was a lot of crossover. When you're born in the 80s, you sort of experience, regardless of when you're born in the 80s, you sort of experience both of them. There's a lot of like...
Right. So it's interesting, you know, growing up with not a lot of money and kind of just where we could, we'd get those Tiger handhelds. Well, my first console, quote unquote, was a Game Boy that somebody bought me for my birthday. Yeah. And I don't remember how old I was. I'm pretty sure it was maybe 4th or 5th grade. But that was like my video game thing. You know, every birthday and every Christmas, I would ask for money for a video game or I'd ask for a specific video game, and I would just play the snot out of it, right? And so that was my console. Growing up, we only had one TV in the living room, so there was no like, hey, let's get a Nintendo and take the TV.
Right.
My parents were like kind of fundamentally against that, and I would have to go back and ask them, but I'm pretty sure they were fundamentally against us having 2 TVs as well. They like to do things as a family.
Yeah.
So, but I was immediately absorbed. I mean, I've always liked video games, and so I would make friends with the neighbors who had a video game system because I wanted to play their Nintendo. So I actually have one of my oldest friends, who is still a really good friend of mine. He was a neighbor kid, and I first became friends with him because he had a Sega Genesis, and so I would go over there and play, and we developed a friendship that way. So anywho, fast forward many years. My first console that I actually owned that wasn't like a hand-me-down or something was the PlayStation 1. So somebody gave me, like one of my friends gave me a Nintendo with a ton of games, and we sold it and put that money towards the PS1. And then it was all over.
Off to the races, huh?
I stopped going outside. I stopped playing basketball. I was just like, it's all about PlayStation now. And so I'm a Sony guy. I have been since I've owned the system. That's my primary console of choice. Right now I have a PS4, I have a Nintendo Switch, and I have a PC. I have owned a 360 in the past, but I haven't really been a big Xbox guy. And even honestly, historically, since the Super Nintendo, I haven't been like a big Nintendo guy. But the Switch kind of hooked me. So as opposed to you maybe, and you can agree or disagree with me, I'm kind of more like up on like the current stuff. So I stay on top of like
I think
what's out right now.
One of the things is when you buy an Xbox One, because you're anticipating some games that never come out.
This is another
trigger. I'm gonna trigger y'all. Should have bought a PS4. Too late now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when most of these popular games this generation, for being honest, the things that I would be interested in,
right,
they came out on the PS4 only, and you know that's just the way it is. The games that I'm interested in, the things I like to play, are a lot of single-player, story-driven games, and so if that's not what you're putting on your console, it doesn't appeal to me. So I've transitioned a lot away from console to PC just because there's a lot more stuff that I'm interested in playing on the PC.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, but to kind of tell you guys the reason why I want to do this. I love talking about anything that has like an artistic flair to it. Video games have evolved so much, you know, and it's interesting that we're in a time now where everybody's kind of a gamer, you know, in some way, shape, or form, and that to be a geek is almost cool. But you know, you and I remember what it was like when it's like the guys that liked Star Trek and Star Wars and video games and comic books were like the segmented part of society. You're like, oh, you guys are these dorks over here, you know, twiddling your thumbs and playing Magic the Gathering, you know. And now it's just like this has become so mainstream, and the generation following us up, you know, are now like esports and Fortnite, and it's such a huge part of mainstream culture for our generation and below us that, you know, it doesn't really, it's almost kind of lost some of its specialness in that way. And not to go on a rant about that, but to tell you that I've appreciated it my whole life, and I've always considered it a bit of an art form. And I love, like you and I both love movies. We love good storytelling. You're more into books than I am, but a good story and good art in general, I think, is worth discussion. You know, worth talking about. So I'm passionate about talking about what I love about games. You know, what they convey, how they appear in society, how they affect us personally, all those kinds of things. So hopefully as we go through the show over the weeks, we'll get to touch on all those topics. But that's my motivation for doing it, is because I'm just passionate about, you know, I'm passionate about this hobby. And funny enough, I don't play games nearly as much as I used to. It's been a while since I've been like really hooked on one, even though I own a lot of systems. I kind of only end up playing maybe an hour a day at most. But I really enjoy the industry. I enjoy following it. I enjoy the commentary on it. Sort of
like people that follow sports. I like to compare it to sports because there's people that they don't necessarily watch every single baseball game, but they check the scores. You know, they don't ever watch every basketball game, but they check the scores. They're saying, "Oh, that guy's leading." They're really into it, and that's just as nerdy as checking. You know, what games are coming out? What did someone think about it? What does my favorite commentator say about this game? Or you know, watching something. About it. It's very similar, and I think I was sort of on the tail. You mentioned earlier that transition between like geek culture becoming the norm, the mainstream. I was sort of at the tail end of it, where like when I was in high school, I remember watching some kids, and I'd go and watch kids play Magic the Gathering. I was on the football team. I was with the, you know, I was not a cool kid, but I knew the cool kids. You know, I was one of those people. But I would go and I'd watch these kids play Magic the Gathering, and I got really into it. I thought, oh, this is really cool. This is neat. You know, I liked Lord of the Rings. I liked Star Trek, and so that kind of stuff appealed to me. And then by the time I think I graduated, World of Warcraft had come out, and that was sort of like Halo or the Warcraft, that era. Those things got so popular that people were just like, it's fine, we can keep playing video games even though we're older, and they didn't abandon those fun things that they were doing when they were kids.
That's awesome. I agree with everything you just said there. So just to say, you know, I think it's relevant to talk about this stuff. And if you're older, I don't know why you're listening to the show if you don't like video games. But if you're older and you're listening to this and you're like, this isn't my thing, you know, why are you guys wasting your time? I think the sports analogy is a really good thing. And it's just like now video games as a culture are starting to seep their way video games are starting to seep their way into the culture the same way that sports have become that. So anyway, this is sort of something that we're passionate about. Anyway,
Yeah, we could talk about that for like another
we could.
10 hours.
I just want you guys to all get an idea of our background and where we're coming from. But I do want to bring up a topic because we want this show to stay relevant. And so something happened this last week. I believe it was this last week.
Yeah, within the past couple of weeks.
Within the past couple of weeks, something happened big in regards to a plagiarism article or a review that fell under some scrutiny. So what do you know about it, Daniel? And then
well, so there was a fellow named Boomstick Gaming, and he put out a video claiming that an IGN editor had plagiarized his review, his video review.
How'd you first see that? Did you just come up on your feed, or?
It did.
Yeah.
I think it was on Reddit.
Okay.
I think someone had posted it on Reddit, and I was like, my joke is to say that IGN doesn't matter. I like to joke.
Right.
That IGN doesn't matter, make fun of IGN because it's the big guy.
Right.
But so it piqued my interest because it was like, if someone's actually claiming plagiarism by IGN, that's a serious issue. And so I watched the video and I thought, wow, yeah, that's plagiarism. That's pretty clear.
Right.
So in the video, if you want me to talk about it, it's a review of Dead Cells, a new game that came out. And basically the structure of the review, the way that it flows, not word for word, it's basically as if, when you're a kid and you're writing a report and you say, well, I found this, I'll just change a few words, and that's not plagiarism. That's basically what this guy did. He took his structure and his words, and he just put in words, changed them here, but it's the same. It flows the same, and it was clear. And so, obviously, it became viral. Boomstick Gaming became viral, and the editor was a guy named Philip Mewson, I believe it's pronounced.
Yeah.
And over the next couple of days, more allegations of plagiarism came out, which was crazy.
Yeah, so I kind of found out the same way. So I was, usually in the morning before I go to work, I hop online and, check all my social media, whatever. But I was on YouTube, and it was like the number one, like the top video in there, just on the main page. And I was kind of like, you see so much stuff pop up, and you're like, oh, this is just some guy looking for attention, and so I didn't even watch the video the first time I saw it. But that was my first kind of glimpse at it. And I think I went on Kotaku, which is another website I frequent. And it was one of the stories on there. Right. It's like, oh, this is actually, it might be worth checking out. This might be a serious thing. So I went and watched the video. Boomstick had posted, basically a comparison. This is a video review, right? So this isn't even a written review. No. So think of all the implications with that. With having to watch his, I was listening to Colin's podcast today, and he was talking about how he was like mentioning, like, think about the effort this kid had to go through.
So much more work into it by plagiarism than if he just doing it himself.
Yeah, like he had to watch the video and write down, like he couldn't even copy and paste. He had to watch it and write down. And the insanity of this, again, I'll reference Colin. You'll hear me say that a lot because I admire a lot of his work. But he was talking about how, okay, this plagiarism kind of makes sense in when you're talking about something factual. Like maybe I'm reporting on an event. So I want to, but you're talking about, you're copying somebody's opinion.
Right.
Like, how lame is that? It's like, you're not just copying the way somebody pontificated on a particular event that happened. You're saying this opinion, like, you're not even creative enough to think of your own opinion. That would be like you reviewing a game on this show, and then me going and literally just copying what you had to say. And it's just like, wait, do you have any feelings of your own? Like,
did he play the game? Like, it brings so much implications. Like the amount of effort to steal someone's content instead of just creating your own. It actually takes more effort.
Yeah.
You might as well have just done nothing because you've accomplished so little, but you put in so much work to do it.
So did you hear the follow-up about his like apology video?
Oh yeah, I saw it. Yeah, Yang Yav reported on it, and he showed it. And it's brutal, man. He basically...
I didn't see it, so you can tell me about it.
So he basically goes on, and he's super condescending. He doesn't admit to anything. He says, he's super condescending. He tells Boomstick Gaming, he says, "Oh, keep with it. Man, you're doing a good job. Keep with it. Keep up the hard work."
He's talking to Boomstick. Trying to encourage him.
And then he says, this is the kicker, right? Is someone had already put out another article saying that he had plagiarized a FIFA game.
Oh, okay, yeah.
A review of a FIFA game. And so he commented on that, and he said, "Good luck, hey, whatever, you're trying to get me, I get it. Good luck with that. I give you permission. Keep looking."
Right.
And he told the internet to keep looking.
Right. He actually, I think he specifically challenged Jason Schreier.
He did.
Who is the head journalist for Kotaku, who regardless of what you think about that site has its problems. But Jason Schreier is really well respected within the industry,
Right.
and he's often looked at as like a true journalist. And this guy basically
challenged
him to do this. So he's like, all right, I'll do
Okay.
that. And was able to come up with more and more evidence.
Right.
To show,
Basically, so much of his stuff, review after review, down to the word for word things that he's just lifted from other places and used. And it's like, I don't.
right.
It's
Like, I mean,
crazy.
I'm not saying like, I'm not going to. So I could understand a little bit better if it was like, okay, maybe this guy, he was under the deadline.
Right.
I'm not excusing it. That doesn't make it right. But maybe he just made a stupid mistake. He was like, I need to get this review out. I don't know what happened at the time. I'm going to cheat a little bit. Right. Like, that's one thing. And even then, that's still, I think, inexcusable. But for him to have a history of this and then to release a video like that, which now he's taken down, I think.
Yeah,
he's taken down his apology video. And so you're like, and so now IGN has basically had to go back, and I think they've completely
They took
expunged
all of his stuff.
everything
All of his
that
stuff is gone.
he did down. And so the next question kind of comes through is like, how does this happen? Like, I have a theory, a little bit of a theory. I don't know much about what it takes to get into professional journalism, but as somebody who's been through college, I in college they have now they even have like systems in place, like computer systems where when you submit, you have to submit basically your whatever you wrote, a research paper, and they'll put it through like a checker.
Yeah, and it shows you, like, if it's one of these ones, it'll show you the percentage. It knows exactly where you're getting your stuff
Right.
and your language. And if you put too big a percent of somebody's stuff in there, their words, it shows it.
Right.
Like, and it can even track it not just from your source that you got it from, but a source beyond that where they got it from.
Sure. I don't know how old this kid is or when he started going to college, but I think even before, I still feel like, okay, let me personalize this a little bit. So I was a communications major. Yeah. Real useful degree. But I wrote a lot of research papers, and in the undergraduate degree program that I was in, there's not a ton of actual research that you do. You don't go out and do a lot of case studies. You're usually reading somebody else's case study, or you're reading a peer review article that you use to talk about a specific topic, right? So essentially what you're doing is you're taking somebody else's research and rewording it in your own words to say, this is my conclusion based upon somebody else's research. It doesn't require a lot of originality. And so I'm halfway decent at writing papers, I think.
Right.
And so I wonder, but there were still times where I felt like I'm just regurgitating somebody else's hard work. And I wonder if that similar
here's the
mindset is
difference.
brought into the workplace to say, I'm just going to now I know he was an egregious example
Right.
of this, and he continued to get away with it. But you wonder, like, through the hiring process of IGN and kind of like the culture that we're creating, if it's even more of like a systemic thing
Right.
than it is just an isolated case. But I don't know what you think about that.
Well, so I think here's the deal. When someone writes a paper, they have to use sources.
Yeah, that's true.
You
They
can't
have to
know
cite
everything.
sources.
You have
Yes.
to use sources. You don't exist in a vacuum. Like we were saying earlier with worldview, everything impacts you. So the more you learn about a subject, the more that your opinions are formed, the more that you think about the subject. Over time, you should formulate your own opinions based on that.
Right.
You're going to know the information well enough to say it in your own words.
Right.
If you're doing it right. So instead of doing that, instead of using what he's learning from other people, getting ideas and saying, okay, what's my opinion? What do I think about this? Spending 10 minutes even thinking about that.
Right.
He stole it.
Yeah.
So like you're going to have influences. You can watch other people's reviews and get ideas and say, oh, that'd be a good thing to touch on.
Right.
But that doesn't mean copy their format exactly.
Right.
And
Right. There's a few times where it's literally verbatim.
Right.
know?
It is basically changing a single word or adding a word or just saying it slightly different. But the way that the sentence flows,
Right.
idea for idea, it's the same. So
Right.
like with translations, right? There's more literal translation and there's what's called like a more dynamic translation, idea for idea. But they're
Sure.
both translations. So basically he translated what he didn't do word for word is translated idea for idea. He's saying the same thing. He's like, and it's so blatant.
Yeah,
That's
and-
what's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that we're talking about an opinion, right? Like
Right.
he probably didn't even play the game. That's my guess. Because then, like, if you played the game, let's say you played the game and you hated it, like, can't you just write, I didn't like this game?
Right.
Like, I didn't like it has to be the easiest thing in the world to do It's just talk about what it is that you liked or you didn't like about something.
Well, see, like you say that, and I think there's probably a lot of pressure working in a big place like IGN. There's a lot of pressure on this guy to produce.
Yeah.
The thing is, with him, is it goes back before he was at IGN.
Right.
I think
so.
They've shown that these are reviews that were on his personal YouTube channel that they've shown plagiarism.
Right.
It's going back so far, and you notice, like when you watch a video, somebody that does video games and their primary thing is like just doing vlogs or saying, hey, here's what I bought recently. And then suddenly they've got like a review up. Right. You can hear the Wikipedia in it.
Yes.
You said, oh, I just read that article on Wikipedia a second ago because you were talking about this game and I wanted to read about it.
Right.
You've just read Wikipedia verbatim. Did you cite Wikipedia?
Right.
Like, did you write about it yourself? Did you say, take that information and write about it?
Yeah.
Tell people about it?
So do you think this opens up the floodgates for not just IGN but other sites to be more diligent in how they? Because here's the truth of the matter, right? From what I understand, it's not like somebody like this got by all the editors, and I know Boomstick Gaming is a small outlet, right. So maybe that was part of his strategy. Yeah. Find somebody who only has maybe a few hundred views, right, and isn't like a big deal, and copy that. But it did get past all of IGN's editors. So where are we going to start to see more of a crackdown? Do you think we're going to see more people come out that are exposed in this light, or do you think this is pretty isolated?
Well, I hope that IGN will take a look at themselves, take a look at their editors and say, have we hired the right people?
Right.
When we hired this person, did we require them to write a paper,
to
write sample articles? And did we check those things? Did we look at their catalog closely?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, this is a huge blow to IGN. They've done the right thing. They've responded in the right way. They've offered, I believe they offered compensation to Boomstick Gaming, monetary. They've taken down all these reviews. They fired the guy. They did the right things in order to make amends. But going forward, this can't happen again. These big outlets, they can't afford these kinds of things because the way that the internet works is if you lose, like you see when a YouTuber starts to lose subs, it keeps going down and down and down and down. And that's really what happens is that people care. And the gaming industry is funny because there's fans that are so dedicated and they actually care about the culture that surrounds gaming.
Right.
And so to have something like this, you've got to respond in the right way.
Definitely. And I think they did what they could. It'll be interesting to see what people think about IGN going forward. I know IGN isn't just one editor, it's multiple editors. And so they'll probably be fine. But it's just interesting because IGN already has a reputation. People kind of poo-poo.
Yeah.
Everybody makes the claim that, you're being paid off to review this. And people say that sometimes sincerely and sometimes I think just to jab at them. But now you're starting to see things where, okay, now the ethics of your company are being questioned even further.
Right.
But yeah, I do give them props. They did follow up exactly, how I feel like they should have. And so we'll just see going forward and how that plays itself out. But yeah, that's super interesting to me. I wanted to just kind of talk about that again. Again, guys, if you guys are new to the subject, you probably aren't, but plenty of other good articles out there. So anywho, that's our topic for the week. I wanted to ask you, what are you playing right now, Daniel?
What am I playing right now? Well, I have been streaming a lot.
Yes, tell us about your streaming site.
Yeah, so I've been streaming
plug yourself.
On FlyFox.
Plug yourself is my new thing.
Plug yourself. What am I plugging? All right. Anyways, that's enough of that. Then maybe we don't want to say that. I mean, hold up. Before we go there,
I guess
again,
it could
not
be
sanctioned by Apologia. This
I guess
podcast
it could sound wrong,
right?
But I meant it, and give your plug about your show.
Plug my stuff.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna try to cleanse my brain here, fellas. All right, so FlyFox Productions, YouTube channel FlyFox Productions. Also, you can on Twitch FlyFox Pro and on Facebook. And usually I'll stream in the mornings on Facebook, sort of just building my audience, trying to get people to watch it, more casual. No expectations, and that's been going pretty well.
What are you streaming right now? What games are you doing?
I've been playing a lot of MMOs, some free-to-play MMOs. They're really easy to play while you're talking to people and engaging. Star Trek Online, Neverwinter. I've been playing some Hearthstone. I've been playing some Stardew Valley.
Right.
Just basic, easy stuff. Excuse me. But it's been going really well. I've been getting people that don't actually watch on Facebook, people that don't usually watch games, and they're just there to talk to me and be engaging on a live stream, and people like that. There's something that appeals to somebody to be able to actually engage and see your interaction on the screen.
Sure.
So it's been going really well. done some Twitch streaming lately, and just trying to build that up. You know, that's a nice little revenue stream if you can get it going. And so that's what I'm hoping for. But I've been thinking about getting back into World of Warcraft.
Uh-oh.
And
You're about to have a kid. Do you really want to do this?
well, see, here's the thing. I'm gonna set up boundaries for myself.
Yeah.
It's gonna be play only while streaming, right? That's the goal.
Yeah, just wait till your first raid comes,
Right.
And then your wife is.
Well, see,
screaming at
I've
you.
always been a pretty casual player.
Sure.
So I was always in a casual guild that didn't do regular raiding and things like that. So I'll be pretty good as far as that goes. Basically, I want to stream something that people will actually watch
Right.
on Twitch. But
Besides just the streaming, like what you're playing a host of different games. Is there one in particular you're really enjoying?
well, so let me say the one game this last year that I played more than anything and I super enjoyed was Divinity Original Sin 2.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a little bit
gonna get
before,
that someday.
and it is the best RPG I've ever played, hands down.
Really?
But mechanics wise, I can say that story. That's just people's opinions as far as the story goes. You know, it's serviceable, it's good. There's a lot of interesting things there. There's interesting characters, but ultimately, this is the closest to a tabletop pen and paper RPG that I've ever played, where you have the freedom to do things, to figure things out on your own. It's open world, but at the same time, you have a storyline that you're following. You don't just go off and explore things on your own necessarily, but you have freedom to do that if you want. You can figure out different solutions to things, different puzzles, and it's just fun. The mechanics are good. The magic system, that's so great. You can combine and do all these things, and
It's only
fantastic.
PC, right?
It's actually, I think it's on.
I think it's on
Xbox.
PS. Yeah, it might be on consoles as well.
They just released the original
remember.
one was on Xbox. I'm pretty sure it is. They're
I'll have to
releasing
double-check
the definitive edition, I think it's called, is coming out or just came out. And
Yeah.
so if you're thinking about checking it out,
You'd recommend it.
oh yeah, I'd recommend that big time.
That's on a bucket list of things I want to do. Unfortunately, I'm playing too many games right now
Right.
as it is. Well, yeah. So I bought Octopath Traveler for
Nice.
the Switch, which is like a throwback to old 16-bit RPGs. It's got
Which
a
is
very,
your bread and butter.
Yeah, I loved growing up with JRPGs, and it's really good so far. But it's interesting the way that the game plays. So you got like 8 different protagonists, and you kind of choose one at the beginning, and then you basically follow through on one story.
So you know what's
path.
interesting is there was a game called Seventh Saga for the Super Nintendo.
Okay.
You probably never heard of it. It's an RPG, but it's sort of like that. You had different characters you could choose.
Is it part of like the Saga series, like Saga Frontier? And those
No,
games?
no, I don't
Okay.
think it is. But you basically you picked one character, and then the other characters that you didn't choose, they would join your party over
Right.
time. And I don't think I ever beat it, but like as soon as you said that about Octopath, which I have
Yeah.
not played, that it reminded me of that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's like everybody. So depending on who you play, like I'm playing as the thief right now, whose name I forget, but that's kind of my main guy. I've gone through and I've collected all the main characters, and they all have like a little prelude type story, so you get the gist of what their motivation is. But unlike a Final Fantasy game where you kind of have, at least so far, I'm not that far into it. I may be 10 hours into it, but I've read some other reviews, and I don't have any expectation that this will change. You don't really kind of come together and interact with each other so much. It's not like a Final Fantasy game where it's about the party itself. You have one protagonist, but it's really about the group, and you're fighting like a big bad evil. Like those guys are just kind of there. They don't really say anything, but you're playing out the main protagonist's
Right.
story. So you can finish one guy's story, then you can pick it back up and go to the next person and finish out their story, but they're all
See, that interests
diverse
me.
from each other. They're not like part of one big, hey, we're all coming together to fight Meteor or
Right.
whatever it is. So that's interesting. The combat, I really enjoy that. It's a turn-based combat system, but they throw just enough flair in there to make it interesting in terms of how they mix it up. So I'm actually enjoying the combat a lot more than I thought I would. So that's one thing I'm playing. I just rebought the Walking Dead complete series.
Yeah.
So I
The
bought it because it
Telltale
was
games?
Yeah, the
Oh, they're
Telltale
so
games
good,
because
man.
I only played season 1 and season 2. I
Same.
think I played one of the spin-offs, like 500 Days or whatever that was. But I didn't play the last season, and now we're going into the final season.
Right.
But you could, if you pre-ordered it for $20 on PSN, you'd get the entire thing.
Wow.
So I'm like, I'm going to go back through and replay this.
Right.
So I'm doing that. I'm also finishing up Telltale's Batman series, the second season. So I'm in kind of just going all over the place, and because I haven't really, nothing's really hooked me to the point of like wanting to just sit there in front of the TV for hours and hours. The last game that did that was God of War, which I platinumed,
Right.
the only platinum I've ever gotten.
Wow.
But yeah, and so I'm kind of just spreading my time out. But so far, Octopath Traveler is pretty good. And if you're a fan of old school JRPGs and you don't own it already, I mean, I would definitely. There's a pretty sizable demo you can download that gives you a really good idea of what the game is about.
Well, it's intriguing to me. I wish I had a Switch. I might get it, but
yeah, it's good. That's my one recommendation that I'm playing. Oh, I did buy Dead Cells, but I haven't played it enough to really give you.
I mean, obviously, people like it. I mean,
yeah, it's
Phil
cool.
Mewson liked it. Not anymore. Probably not anymore. But
Phil Mewson knew a guy who liked it.
God dang, got him.
So, anywho, but that's my recommendation for this weekend.
Hey,
yeah, real quick, go ahead.
You just bought Infinity War, or yeah.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
I bought the 4K Infinity War.
Right.
Blu-ray.
So we just that I was like, I need to buy that. So we bought it yesterday, and I'm gonna go watch it. And
It's good.
I'm excited to see it again, man, because it was good, and they've done it right.
Yeah.
They've built up to this point, and I may not have liked all the Marvel movies, but I don't like all comics,
Right.
and so I'm excited to see what they do going forward and how they change up the world. But I just thought I'd comment on that because that came out this week.
It did, and I picked it up. So I've got a pretty decent setup. I've got a 4K TV and like a surround sound system.
Yeah, it's pretty epic.
In my room because I'm single and I'm a loser. But yeah. So I rewatched it and I was like, yeah, this movie's good. And there's something about watching the Marvel movies. I know I don't want to go on a whole thing about it, but there's something about watching them at home when I can pause it and get up and go to the restroom.
Right.
I can take my time with it. I enjoy them more in that format than I do
They
sitting
lend
there
to
in the
themselves to
Yes,
rewatchability.
I went back and watched all the Marvel movies, like
Right.
all of them, and even the ones I didn't like in the theater, even the Doctor Stranges and even the Iron Man 2s. Maybe it's because my expectations
Were lower.
were lower,
Yeah.
but I enjoyed them more knowing
See, I think-
what they were
I
rather
think-
than expecting every movie to be Winter Soldier. You know?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, Winter Soldier is the pinnacle. It's the best.
Yeah, it's still the best in my opinion.
Yeah, by far. Because it's a spy movie primarily. But you know what I think is good about Marvel? They've done is they've made a lot of comic book movies.
Yeah.
And they stuck with the formula, and it doesn't necessarily always work. They're not all great.
Right.
Because they all can't break out just enough on that formula. But it also does make them watchable. They're
Yeah.
watchable, and
Very much.
that's good. None of them are just totally broken.
Yeah.
Like some of the DC movies have been. Suicide Squad being number one, I think, on that list. But they're all watchable, and I think that's what Marvel has done right. Is they've made decent movies, and they've gotten themselves to a point where we actually remember the characters, we're invested, and so they can do the emotional things, and it worked
Totally.
out.
Totally, and yeah, I'd love to do a whole show on that because I think there's a lot that we can say about comic books in general. But yeah, as far as recommendations for the week, so Octopath Traveler, I definitely give that a thumbs up. Divinity Original Sin.
Yep.
And if you're into comic books, go pick up Infinity War. So that's it for
All right,
me,
yeah,
man.
man.
That's
Pretty
what do we
fun.
clock in at today? 41 minutes.
Yep. That's
All
what I
right.
got.
So there's the premiere show, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it. If you don't like it, then that's okay too. I don't really care.
Right.
You guys are here to participate with us, and tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. Hopefully we'll have a lot more content here to come, but I'm excited, man. I enjoyed having
No,
this
it's fun.
conversation.
Yeah,
dude.
it's nice to get together in these mornings and do this, record this.
Totally. So our aim is to do one every Saturday, and we're going to record Saturdays. We're going to try to upload it as soon as we can, and then as we continue to grow, maybe we'll get some guests someday, and hopefully maybe even have a place where people can write in or phone in and give us
We have connections to people that would be interesting to talk about. So we'll definitely let you guys know, and we'll keep you apprised of what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, for Coin A Geek, my name is Eliot Hillis again, and for Daniel Schultz, thanks for listening, and we'll see you